So I would turn this over to you. Welcome from California.
Thank you, Sabrina. Hi, everyone. It's very good to see many of you I know. Some of you I don't know, and of course, I'm not seeing you right now, but um, I feel you. So it's a joy to be here. I am I'm a co spiritual director along with Asha. Can you hear me?
We can. If maybe you just speak a little bit louder, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Let me
Thank
just
you.
pull this a little closer too and see. I don't usually think of a soft voice as being my problem, but here we are. So let me know if you cannot hear me. Just put a little note in the chat and I'll watch for it. Good, better. Thank you, Supriya. Um, I've had the great privilege of being in Ananda Palo Alto for 22 years now, is really the most important thing about my life. I was picked up by Master in Encinitas and dropped off in Palo Alto right at the time that the community was blossoming here, right before we uh, founded our church. We had many satsangs that were going on for years before that, actually, out of homes. So for all of these years now, I've been able to be steeped in these teachings. I think there are some of you who are with us today who have been with Ananda at least that long. I started with Ananda in 1979, but did not move into the community until the year 2000. So it's been a joy. I will tell you, I am a physician also. I still practice a little. And the only reason that's important is because both Master and Swamiji gave me just a multitude of miraculous experiences through my professional life that have been able to be woven with my spiritual life. So I frequently tell stories that have to do with medicine. Who knows what'll come up today, but let's see. So I just want to check in. Should I stop speaking by 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock your time? I'm
Anywhere around there is just fine.
okay.
Around 12, because we do like to have time for people to ask questions, make comments, and
Yes,
draw even more individually. So anywhere around 12 would be great.
great. So this is a very big topic for a relatively short period of time. Just changing my view here back to gallery so I can see all of you. Um, it's very difficult to talk about the way Swamiji has presented to us this reading of how devotees rise. And because nobody's read it, I'd like to read the reading for today. Um, Last week, we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of the material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of inner joy to be set aside for lesser duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary, on this occasion, was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary, this time, was serving inwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister, Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies towards restless activity. The important thing that is that spirit should be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one, by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement, can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, me ye have not always with you. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Now, that reading and the reading of last week, may I just ask, do you have Sunday service every week? So somebody gave service last week on how devotees fall, which is wonderful. I'd like to start there for just a moment because I want to say I happen to have given Sunday service here in Palo Alto last week, and I decided to dive deep in the reading about Adam and Eve. Perhaps this very same point was made in your service last week. But in case it isn't, I want to say that one of the things that I saw with clarity that I had not seen before in all of the years of these readings is that when God created man, which was a conscious creation, a very important point for us to know, not that it would surprise us, of course it wouldn't, but it was a conscious creation because he realized that animals which were as high as the souls had ascended until that time were ready for the ability to move much further in their movement back towards union with the divine. So he created human beings, but he did not just manifest new souls. He took the souls of two animals, in essence, and he put them in these beings that he was creating, which we have come to call Adam and Eve. So, in all fairness to Adam and Eve, and to all of us since then, we were created with the souls of these animals. Hence, we have within us a deep memory, not in our mind's memory, but at an energetic level of these animalistic instincts. And we can just lump all of that into Maya or Satan or delusion or ego, for that matter, because in essence they're all the same. The pull outward for us, pull, P-U-L-L, pull, is enormous. And it's enormous because that's what we were imbued with, if you will. So God was giving us a very hard job right from the get-go. And as Master has said many times and in many ways, but last week I read, he said about the why of it. Why did he do that? We always ask. It's a very good question. And Master says, you will know when you will know. Meaning, let go of the why of it. This is something else we've all heard. And let's just get on with this long journey that we're on. We read about it every week in the festival. We hear about it. It's certainly attainable. That's what all of the avatars have come to tell us, as Jesus said so beautifully. Everything I am, you are too, and more. He was saying, this is not just about me. 3 weeks ago, we talked about inner communion in the most beautiful way. So this whole sequence of talks is so perfectly put together. Of course, it would be. But Swamiji says very clearly, we all need to pay attention to what happened to Judas, because we all have a little Judas in us. Delusion is something Swamiji says. Don't just acknowledge it. He says elsewhere, not in this week, fear it, not in the sense of cowering before it, but in the sense of saying, how am I going to rise back out of this fall? How am I going to see to it that I don't just keep being drawn in the way Judas was? Because as I'm sure you heard last week, here was Judas, who was one of the 12 disciples. If he fell the way he fell, imagine what's in it for us. Imagine not being one of the 12 disciples, although we do need to remember we are second generation disciples. That's huge for us. Master came, Swamiji was with him, then us. Every one of us has it in us to be able to make this climb, even as it gets steeper as we go. But we need to bring enormous effort to it. Swamiji's words are, doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it. He says, indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. Because, as he says, I just read that quote from Swamiji, but I'll quit reading now. As Master said, we're not free until we're resting in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So this whole question of how we keep turning our attention back with huge effort, I'd like to share a little story with you that I told last week in Sunday service. My partner and I got a puppy about 8 months ago, and he's precious, but he's still a puppy, and it's enormous work to train a puppy. Now, having just read about Adam and Eve and the animal instinct, I was paying closer attention to Max, is his name. And we have a trainer who's training us, of course. And the trainer was showing me, how do we train these puppies out of the essence of who they are, which is pure instinct? They just want what they want when they want it. That's called id. It's another word for instinct. And we all have that in us in the same way. All of us who are here today are a little more refined. But if we're honest, we can all acknowledge how often we want to give in to that instinct. As I said last week, maybe it's one cookie. Maybe it's one kiss at the beginning of a date. Maybe it's hitting the snooze alarm one more time. It's all of that. We just want to go there. And it's powerful. We've all done that. Instead of saying, absolutely not, I am going to get up out of bed right now, and I'm going to start with super conscious living exercises, because that's how devotees rise. Not that you have to do the super conscious living exercises, but if you're somebody who likes to play with the snooze alarm, it's a good way to get going. How is it that we turn ourselves away? So from all of those temptations, and that's what we're struggling with to rise. We're making sure that we energize every morning, because why would Master have told us to energize? He's saying to us, you are a part of this huge sea of energy. How are you going to learn to bring your awareness right back to it and use it constantly? Otherwise, we just get a little lazy. And it's easy. This is what Swamiji's saying to us. Fear it. Delusion is huge. But if we remember each of our techniques and we say to ourselves, why did Master give us energization? Why do we do, if we're Kriyapans, Mahamudra? Even if we're not Kriyapans, whoever is not a Kriyapan, if you've gone far enough through these lessons, you've gotten Mahamudra. What is Mahamudra saying to us, and why would it have been given? Why do we practice Hang Sa? What is that peace that we can get to? Every one of our techniques, right up to and including Kriya, is how we will get on this path, stay on this path. In the end, as always, there's nothing short of meditation. We have to, and that's what the Gita reading said for this week, you have to come back to meditation, but it needs to be balanced with action. And action can be the techniques. Action can be all of the ways that we serve. But we have to choose to be doing it with and for God. Otherwise, it's what Swamiji called in the reading. I don't have it open, but I think he said restless fussing. I love that phrase, restless fussing. That's a lot of what we do. I mean, we also have a lot of Martha in us. Again, if we're honest. But back to the trainer. I said to the trainer, I want to work on barking because Max has found his voice now and he's starting to bark. And it's very annoying to have a dog bark instinctively, just their way of speaking. I can't blame him, but we don't want them to bark all the time. And the trainer said to me, take his very favorite treat, happens to be duck jerky right now, but doesn't matter. You think of what your favorite treat is. Take his favorite treat, put it in front of his nose, and say, Max, look at me. And the trainer, who I don't think is necessarily on any spiritual path, I'm not sure, but he does it just like this. Max, look at me. The treat's in this other hand, but we're getting Max to look right at the point between the eyebrows. But he has got to look at me in my eyes. And at first, he can't have the treat if he can't do it for 3 seconds. Then we keep expanding that. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I have him at 20 seconds now. He's peering into the third eye. And it is it's cute about Max. But if we, every time our mind wanders in meditation, every time we're stepping out to allow ourselves moments of delusion on what becomes a very, very slippery slope, very quickly we find ourselves misbehaving. Why did Sri Yukteswar say over and over to his devotees, behave yourself? And what did he mean by behave yourself? He meant all the same things that we would talk about, the way it is that we can fall, that we have to keep rising. Master said, at the first thought of delusion, he said, that is the time to stop it. Because once you play with it, once you worry it, once you decide to give yourself a little room, whatever it is, and this doesn't mean that we have to be so strict. That would be no fun. We don't want to make the path so narrow that we have to fall off of it. We need room. We all need room. But what these weekly talks are about is giving us an opportunity every Sunday to see what the highest goal is, what the masters want from us. We don't punish ourselves if we slip. You know, some years ago when I was giving this talk, I remember this because it was a poignant moment. Just the day before the talk, I was out walking and I was in a park, and I was watching this little boy. He wasn't totally steady on his feet yet. Maybe he was 2. So he could walk and he could run, but he didn't know to pay attention. He would let his attention wander, his gaze wander. He was drawn by whatever the most sparkling toy was, very much like us, exactly like us. But he was solid. He had this solid constitution. I have a very clear vision of him, though I think it was probably 5 years ago. He started running, and his mother was engaged in a conversation elsewhere. And I saw where he was going, and I saw what he was going to trip on. But there was nothing for me to do. He had just taken off. And of course, it happened just like I thought it would happen. He tripped, he went down. He was 2, and he was burly. And I watched him from the ground. I watched his little lip quiver a little bit. And then he looked around. Nobody was watching him. I very quickly turned my head away because anybody who's a mother knows what happens with kids. And I didn't want him to think I was looking at him. When he didn't think anybody was looking, there wasn't going to be any pity, any sympathy. There wasn't going to be any gain from the fall. He just picked himself up, brushed off his knees, and kept going. And it was such a poignant moment for me when I was giving this talk, How Do Devotees Rise? And that's what I was just saying before that story came back to me. I didn't know I was going to tell it today, but it's so perfect. It's not the fall that matters. So I heard myself saying, do this, do this, do this. Yeah, there are all the things to do. Get up, do super conscious living exercises, review all of the techniques, take them seriously. You know, I mean, read what Swamiji said. I'm going to close with the Swamiji wrote in his expanded commentary on last week's talk. So if nobody read it, he wrote the reverse of what was the Gita's reading that started last week with, if you ponder on sense pleasures, you remember it, then you go here, then you go here. Doesn't even matter. He just painted the picture of the whole downward fall. Once you let the sense pleasure get your attention, once you're pondering, that's why Yogananda says at the first thought of delusion, that's the time to stop it. But I heard myself saying things and I thought, wow, it's not sounding like fun. But it is fun. When you stand up and you brush your knees off, you get to still have the playground as opposed to be crying on the ground about poor me. Because one thing we can know, and this is the truth, whatever it is for each of us that would take us down, whatever it is that's the hardest for us in this life, maybe it's our feelings get hurt easily, maybe we love attention, maybe we're drawn to be a little more promiscuous in our lives than we would like to be. Doesn't matter what it is. That's not what's horrible. There's nothing really horrible. That is the very thing we came in to work on. The very thing that you struggle with the most, that your mind wants to say, but they did this and they did that, or this is hard, or that. That is exactly what we came in to work on. And it's the hardest thing for us. Swamiji says we come into each life to work on one or two things. Imagine that. So you look at what is the most difficult. Are you judgmental? That's what you came in to work on. Are you attached to material success for a sense of safety? That's what you came in to work on. Spiritually, to be free. So we're handed exactly what it is we need. As Bharat once said on a story that I'm not going to tell because there's not enough time, but a beautiful story. He says, basically, when you have that image and you're struggling with something, it's struggling, and you're justifying it, you're saying to yourself, but they were awful to me. Of course I was going to yell at them. Anybody would yell at them. How could I not get mad? Or I was offered a better job, with more money. So I needed to leave, and leave maybe more quickly than I should have, because look at all that money. Like we say every Sunday, I'd be a fool to not keep what was mine for myself. That's the little bird speaking, right? He's just living out there. That's in this stage of the revolt. We're no longer in the revolt, but nonetheless, it's very easy. But tell yourself, wait a minute, Master said, grab it now. And if this is something that bothers me often, that's what you were given to work on. And that's how we rise. We take on the challenge because it's been given to us by God and gurus. That's exactly the point. Those things that are most challenging. That's been the gift that we've been given so that we can rise up out of delusion. So let me just I want to finish in time so that we can talk. I just mentioned one more thing. I'm sorry, because it's so much a part of the reading this week. Success on the spiritual path doesn't come passively, ever, no matter what it is. Swamiji kept saying his words, the spiritual path is not for sissies. And it's not. It's hard because it's pulling right on that vritti that's stuck in you. You know how it is, we look at each other, somebody comes to you for advice. I'm sure it happens with all of you. It happens to me all the time because it's my job in this world as a physician, as a spiritual director, as a spiritual counselor. And the temptation is to say to them, it's so easy. Quit doing that. It's so simple. Just don't do that anymore. Whatever that is. Just tell your partner to quit treating you like that. Just don't overeat the next time. Just say no to the food. Find ways. Don't keep it in your house. You want to just say it with that attitude. It doesn't matter what it is. Until you realize that that is the hardest thing for them. And then you realize that you have to teach them how to teach ourselves, but it doesn't matter in this instance. How do we find the inspiration for that? How do we change not just the habit, but the consciousness behind it? And that is hard. So it takes great effort to go on this ascending path that we all want to go on. I'm just looking for this reading that I wanted to read to you because there's so much more. Of course, we could talk for hours. There's so many points in this lesson that I'm just jumping over, but it's okay. We're here to be together and to feel the inspiration of it, and that's what matters. But I want to read to you what Swamiji wrote. None of you looked like you remembered, so I just want to start it. I'm not going to read it, but the end of the reading last week from the Bhagavad Gita, which is Why Devotees Fall, started with, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction. Is this sounding familiar to anyone? It's a beautiful reading from the Gita because, as I said, it's a little scary. But anyway, it goes from attraction to desire. When your desires aren't fulfilled, we get angry. From anger, there arises this infatuation. Infatuation means we think that's the only thing in the world that will satisfy us. We get so hooked on it. And then from infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self, and then degeneration of the discriminatory faculty. It's a very powerful stepwise fall that Krishna is saying to us. And from when discrimination is lost, Krishna says, and it's so easy to lose our discrimination. That's the point when we decide that we can watch one more YouTube and it won't be bad. And then we look up and an hour's gone. And we've been watching what? Little kids dance, and it's cute. You know, the best wedding, and it's adorable. Little puppies doing funny things. But a very dear friend of mine, who's a pretty highly evolved soul, just said to me, I just get lost in Instagram for hours. Now, that's loss of discrimination, friends. It's very easy to get there. And then Krishna says, from that loss follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. That's where it ended on the fall last week. What I want to read to you is what Swamiji wrote elsewhere. You won't find it in this reading, but he wrote it elsewhere. About that reading, he says, implicit in this warning, I'll end with this, so try and stay with it because it's so beautiful. It's so inspiring. It's so uplifting. It's the path of devotees rising. Implicit in this warning of the Bhagavad Gita is a concomitant promise for when a person concentrates on spiritual ideals. You see, this is rather than pondering sense objects. So he's showing us at each step, what else would we do? For when a person concentrates on spiritual ideals, he feels himself increasingly attracted toward them. From this attraction grows the desire to live by them. So he's saying the very act, as soon as we catch that delusion in the beginning and we concentrate on a spiritual ideal, it lifts our energy. And just by starting that, we feel more drawn to it. This is the answer to how devotees rise. That's why I'm reading it. It's powerful. So we're more attracted to those spiritual ideals. From this attraction grows the desire to live by them. We think, wow, this feels exactly right. We're drawing the energy up our spiritual spine just by focusing elsewhere, just by chanting, just by listening to Swamiji chant Om for an hour at a time, just by having great satsang. This is what it means to concentrate on spiritual ideals, grows the desire to live by them more and more. This desire to live spiritually develops into an intense yearning for God. Such divine yearning flames to impatience anything that might prevent one from realizing Him. It's just so natural. As soon as we look at me, remember that. It's so important. From this impatience with lesser realities arises total absorption in the consciousness of God. From such absorption ensues forgetfulness of the senses. It's so amazing. It just starts by 3 seconds of look at me, and by increasing it daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, over lives. It's what we've done till we're up to 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Look at me. God is calling to us to do that. and from sense forgetfulness arises indifference to worldly modes of thinking and behaving. Estrangement from worldly consciousness results in the complete annihilation of delusion. Isn't that is masterful that Swamiji wrote that. He turned the Gita reading around for us. This is the extraordinary blessing of having these teachings. Extraordinary. That's why in the reading it says, when you're in the midst of a blessing, don't think you'll just put it down and come back later. Years go by, lifetimes go by. We don't get back to it. When you're in the middle of a beautiful satsang, of a deep meditation, of listening to a chant in a way that is just uplifting your soul, ask yourself, really, what's more important than this? Don't just let yourself be drawn out by pondering on a sense object. One more story. I'm very sorry. This is quick. Swamiji had a very dear friend who was at a place in England. I can't remember the name of it right now. It's not Stonehenge, but someplace where they do all organic gardening. Lakshmi, do you know the name of it? Where Rose went a couple years ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a very famous, spiritually, what is it?
Inhorn.
Findhorn, yeah. Swamiji was very good friends with the man who founded Findhorn. And they were talking about this point that is made in the reading. And the man from Findhorn, whose name I never knew, but I certainly don't know in this moment, said to Swamiji, you know, we can't overemphasize this. He said about 6 years ago, I think he said, some time ago, it doesn't matter, you might hear Swamiji talk about it, I was out working after years and years of wanting to pave the driveway. We were finally out there doing it, and my wife called me to come in for lunch. And I said to myself, you should finish this job. You've been wanting to do it, you started it. But then I felt hungry, and then I realized what a great meal she would feed me. And he said, the driveway is still not finished. That's a very important lesson for us. We have the great blessing of a great guru, of Swami Kriyananda, of great souls who have been on this path for all these years. We live amongst angels. That's what Davy said to me last week. I was up there visiting with them about Dr. Peter, a beautiful story about him that I really will not tell you. But when she was done, there were tears in her eyes. And she said, Shanti, we live amongst angels. We have to live in a place of such gratitude and make every effort that we can to make as much progress in this very incarnation. It's our spiritual responsibility. And Swamiji himself uses that word. So I would say God bless us all on our journey.
Thank you, Shanti. We're glad you told another story and another one, and and you took all the points of last week's reading and this week's reading and tied them together so beautifully. And last week many of us were gathered in person at a retreat center with Nayaswami Pranava here. And we had in-person service and of course the reading, and he spoke on the reading. But you did I just love the way you pulled both weeks together. And the reading, the end of the Bhagavad Gita from last week, it's like, oh my God, we get caught up in all these traps, and then it causes the annihilation of our spiritual life.
Right.
It was like I said to Pranava privately later, it's like that reading just kind of choked me. And he said something very sweet and lovingly. He said something like, then behave accordingly. And I think that's what one of our masters said to a devotee as well. Anyway, beautiful job. Thank you for pulling all that together for us and reminding us about how can we really rise by being aware. And the hardest thing that each one of us has, I identified my one or two, when you were talking. That's why I incarnated, to work on those, and some of the others will probably fall away too. That was just beautiful. Thank you. We really now offer for people to comment, as I just did spontaneously, and or ask questions of Shanti. Let her respond to questions in our mind or comments. So cameras open. Are we going to go off of I Think Live Facebook now? And then we invite, well, they're gone already. I was going to invite them to come to our website, but it's okay. So we are off officially. It's just we devotees together. So open cameras, if you will, and speak. Unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. We'll watch for that.
Supriya, just before anybody else speaks, I want to thank you for that comment. That's, what you just did by taking some of the main points, and it's beautiful that you heard them. It speaks just volumes about you, really. But it's often what I feel we do with our music. At the end of a sermon, there's a piece of music. And if the person who's chosen it has chosen well, that song from Swamiji ties up the whole point of the reading, which hopefully was in the sermon. So, and I miss it when it's not there. But you just did that so beautifully. So really, thank you. But more than that, just bless you. I just, for you to have been able to hear all of that is wonderful.
Well, then I want to respond to that, because earlier in the service today, our online service is a little different than in person, but we did the reading of the day, so we heard the reading.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And no, it was great to hear it again.
I mix up my times, everybody, I have to admit. I forgot it was sent to me in Texas time.
It's perfect. But after hearing those words of the reading, then Mark and Mayatri very consciously select an offertory song.
Nice. Beautiful.
And today, it was so beautiful, Keep Calling Him, with a beautiful visual again. So it was like, no matter how many times we fall, just keep calling Him. We are rising. We will rise more. And so I understand what you say about that music, and I'm so grateful that here in Texas, we've been doing this for over 2 years online and now in person some more, but that the offertory music is consciously selected. So beautiful. Thank you for saying that too. Okay, other people, I'm muting myself now.
Hi, Shanti. It's Mark. I just wanted to the reading that you did with Swami, where you reversed the Bhagavad Gita reading. Is that in the expanded readings for Rays of the Same Light?
I hope it is, but I can't remember. I've read it many years, so I have it. Is what I mean. I have it in my files. It might be in Rays of the Same Light from last week, but would you like me to just email it?
I would absolutely love that, because when you were saying about that reading, it's like you may not have made an impression on you. It's like that reading, the very first time I heard it, made a huge impression on me, because it's like from this little infraction, you go all the way to total annihilation of your spiritual life, and it makes a real impression on you. It's kind of like, I grew up Catholic, so it was kind of like the way the nuns would tell us, oh, even if you go and you just sneak a cookie out of the cookie jar, then before you know it, you're going straight to hell. It's kind of the feeling of it. So I appreciate the reverse of that, to say that if you do these things, then it's also it's an upward staircase instead of a downward staircase.
Yeah. I'm going to email. The email that I have is Mayatri's. So is that okay?
No, that's fine.
I'll send it to Mayatri and she can distribute it. But it might just be that if you look in Rays of the Same Light, that it's there, but I might also have gotten it from Promise of Immortality. He just keeps expanding these comments. So, but I'll just send it to you, and then you can look around for it. It's something to read every day. Honestly, it's so inspiring. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. Your examples were great, and I'm a snooze alarm kind of guy. So it's like, but these animals. I just want to say that your story about Max and the and look here and all that. I wondered. I don't remember Master talking about it specifically, or even Swami, but. Animals, do you think that animals have at least some of the apparatus needed to move them along the spiritual path? I'm curious about that because I've seen diagrams and I have no idea if they're real or not and where they came from. Who knows? But where somebody diagrammed out the chakras of different animals. It was like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I was curious what you thought about that.
I think there's just no doubt about it because remember, every single thing that's here in existence, everything. If you asked me the same question, if you said, does a rock have the potential to move along spiritually or a crystal, which will resonate more with all of us, I would have to say, of course, because at its essence, it's a manifestation of divine consciousness. Animals have come so far. I mean, look at what we're learning even about the octopus right now. They are sentient beings. It's powerful. And what we know about dolphins. But when we got Max, one of the things that became clear to me, because I haven't had a dog since I was a very little girl, but I fell in love with this being. And I suddenly I realized, because people would say to me, because Max sort of took over a lot of life for a while, less and less now, but still a big chunk of it. We still need to be home with him. Somebody needs to be home. Anyway, complicated. And people would say, just send him off like to any dog sitter. It's just a dog. And I said, I don't know what that means. He is a soul to me. And somehow, very much like our children, that soul has found its way into my keeping. And I can tell you that I feel it as deeply, I'll say this honestly, as spiritual director of a huge congregation, I feel a deep responsibility for every soul that comes to me, everyone. And I do everything I can to meet people one by one by one. I mean, even scheduling wise, it's a deal because that's what's being asked of me right now. That's how Master's using me. I don't feel that any less with Max, and he responds to that. Max knows who I am exactly. Now, they're much more just, they don't have the ability to read this reading and get it. That's the blessing of a human birth. That's why we cannot squander this life. I really mean that. I know it now. I've read it so many times. I felt it in meditation. I've had so many profound experiences of the sacredness of this life. Now, Max, I don't think Max is thinking like that, but he is an extraordinarily little soul. He is, So, I mean, that's a long answer, but it shows us this progression and it brings us back to the blessing of a human life. And remember, this is not our first human life. The very fact that we're here says that, and we have this access to Master. I just started teaching a series on Friday night that's probably going to go on for a year, every other Friday, called A Deeper Dive into the Essentials on the Spiritual Path. 1 hour class on Friday evenings. But I'm trying to take everything that I talk about very pointedly from the preceptive lessons or from Swamiji's discipleship notes and say to people, this is really a deeper dive. This is specifically for those of us who are here now, as I said before in my talk, second generation devotees. That's quite something, guys. Swamiji looked out at us on more than one occasion when he was speaking. Maybe some of you were there. And he said, every one of you could become Jivan Muktas in this lifetime. Imagine that. Why aren't we? Why? What would keep us from that? He said it thus. He wasn't making it up. He wasn't just holding a proverbial carrot out there. Swamiji told only the truth. You listen to him. There's no filler in what he writes or says. So when he said something like that, for those who had ears to hear, gets your attention. And when I cut my meditation a little short, or all of the things I could tell on myself, I say to myself, Shanti, you have the opportunity to become a Jivamukta. What are you doing? So I'm sorry, it's sort of all over the place, but it's not. It's really the continuum of a soul's long journey. So yes, absolutely yes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Just one quick question: is the class that you're starting, is that something that's available online, or is that an in-person thing?
It is. Just go to our website. It's free, and we're live streaming it. It's the second and fourth Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called Satsang with Shanti, but the subtitle is A Deeper Dive, and it's great. Every
Okay.
week I show a little video of Swamiji or something from Master, then a talk, short talk, and then Q&A or discussion. So yeah, please join us. I'd love to have you.
All right.
And
Thanks for
Shanti,
that.
When you said, this is Stephanie.
hi Stephanie. Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much. Very, very much. We've come to work on one or two things. And first I heard that, meaning there's so much, but only one or two. And I began to think what must be that for me. And what I came up with was something very big and all-encompassing. And then Supriya said, and maybe more. And that's exactly what followed on my thought, that just do that one thing because there's so much connected to it.
Yeah,
And it's not small at all.
that's a beautiful comment, Stephanie. I love that. You know, that's the way the path gets us. If we actually perfect any one thing, which means we have allowed that energy that is literally lodged in our astral spine to make it all the way here. The truth is, it can't do it without our Sushumna being wide open. Kundalini would be released. We'd be free. That's why when Swamiji says from here, and from this attraction grows the desire to live by them, and then he goes on till the last sentence is freedom in God. So he said that. What does that mean? You work on one thing till you get it, and the very act of getting it magnetizes everything else. Everything's energy. So when you draw that energy up and you're realigning everything, the flow in the astral spine, to do that, we'll be free. That's very, it's not just insightful, it's deeply knowing. It's deeply knowing. Yeah, beautiful comment.
Mike, you had unmuted a little while ago. Are you waiting patiently to say something, or?
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me. Hello, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you, Shanti. It's really great what I've heard. A couple of things that did come to mind is about direction versus effort. Of course, if we're heading in the right direction, then the magnitude of it can help, But also, I'm wondering if all that much effort is really needed. That it's just a matter of not causing ourselves troubles. Like if we cross the street and we look left and right and wait for the car, then we didn't cause ourselves any trouble. You know what I mean? Otherwise, there could be a lot of time in the hospital and whatnot. So I'm not sure it's all that difficult to do all these things and to go in the right direction and to be aware of what is our best opportunity. Maybe it's helpful to meditate before we think, say, or do sometimes.
I would agree with that. First of all, good for you if it doesn't feel that difficult. I mean that. And I think there's a little bit of a confusion in a way. You said it doesn't feel that difficult. Difficult isn't really the point of it. But I will say, one of the early things that Yogananda, who, as of course you know, was an avatar, did when he came here for all Westerners is he, I wouldn't say created, but he perceived, manifested the energization exercises. And you know them. And the very first thought with them, and a thought that comes back over and over and over. I don't know where you are on this path, but I assume you've taken a Raja Yoga course somewhere. Maybe you have read the Raja Yoga book. How many times we read in there, the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. So, no, it's not hard. Once you get that energy flowing, all in the right direction, it's not hard at all. But I would say for most of us, getting the energy flowing in the right direction takes a little effort, and that it's extremely meaningful to bring that effort, but that effort could be, I won't say should, but I'm thinking should be joyful. Not like, oh my God, now I got to get more energy. Now I have to do this. When you get to the point where you love to sit to meditate, you love that, you're drawn there, and it's in this thing that Swamiji wrote. But it takes effort. I love that last line of Swamiji's song, The Hill That Was Tara. It's a beautiful song. And the very last line of it, after he's looked at life, wondered about life, wondered what was the meaning of putting out so much effort, And I can't call up all the words, nor do we have time right now. But the last line says, every effort we spend gives more life in the end, till our gladness in life's ever new. And it really means every effort, every bit of effort that we put in, if we're looking here, if we're keeping our attention here, then it leads us to spiritual freedom. So it shouldn't feel heavy, and I love that part of what you're saying. But I can tell you, I'm looking over to my left where I have pages of things that I just wrote as I was going, quotes from Master, so many of them in Swamiji, I just kept writing them. They all talk about the effort that we need to make. So there's some misunderstanding, but if it brings the joy that I see on your face right now, that happiness, that beautiful smile, then it quits feeling like effort. Maybe that's where you are. So I really mean it when I say good for you. But I think it's, for most of us, I want to remember that I have to put in. I have to keep turning myself back in and up. So
That's a joyful willingness. I think that's the whole point of getting that one little thing right about willpower versus the joyful willingness. And it really is so easy. If we don't, we just avoid the little things that can cause us troubles. And then we're always, energizing, doing all the kriyas, and you know, I understand the word effort, but I love the way Swami talks about willingness, and it's not really all that grim, he says.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's
Thank you.
and the phrase joyful willingness is a beautiful phrase. Yeah. I'd like to say that what you folks do with your service of deeply tuning into the topic of the reading and bringing the song there. I'm so sorry I missed it. I have been begging our musicians in Palo Alto to do that forever, and they will not. They make the song at the end of the sermon, and so you never know what's coming before. So I remember Lakshmi was going to give a sermon. These are very deep topics. This was a year ago, and somebody mentioned right before she went up, she whispered to me, "You won't believe what they're going to sing before the sermon." And it was Manana Friends, which is a beauty. Yeah, exactly. Look at Supriya. I said to Lakshmi, close your ears this time, because I wish I would have heard Keep Calling Him. What a beautiful, just speaks to how deeply attuned you are. That was beautiful. So next time I'll know. I knew it, but I got confused. Anyway.
This is just really beautiful. We are nearing the end of time. We don't want to keep Shanti too long. So, but we do want the gratitude and to acknowledge everything. And Mike, what you said, and Stephanie, and just everyone. It's so beautiful. Our online services are a little bit different than our in-person services. But we do try to be mindful of music and energy, of course, and consciousness, and so grateful that we still have this every Sunday. We did not miss, by God's grace and Mark's technical ability, we did not miss a Sunday service even when we had to close the doors of the center.
That is so beautiful.
So we are very blessed here, and you have blessed us by coming online. Thank you again, Shanti. Open cameras, folks. This is our time.
I have a couple questions.
Okie dokie.
Thank you. First of all, it's great to have also Lakshmi on. And Lakshmi, we need to have you back on. If you've got any time in July, we've got a few openings. We'd love to have you on. And I want to also say that Mark and I are going to be in your area at the end of July. So I hope we can get a chance to see you all. We're going to spend a couple weeks nearby and hope to hit upon different places in the Bay Area and catch, of course, the village as well. But so my questions are this. I have two. One is, and these are pretty easy, what kind of dog do you have? What's your puppy? You've been talking about your puppy, but you haven't said what kind, so I want to know that. And then the other thing is, if you would, I would love to hear the story about Dr. Peter, if it's something that you feel like you can share.
Oh, that's very briefly. Lakshmi, are you looking for a picture of Max? There's Max. He's a Havanese. He's the cutest dog in the whole world.
Oh,
he is cute.
So is he like about 20 pounds or 50? He's a smaller dog. Is that what he is?
He's 12 and a half pounds.
Oh, okay.
Shanti.
He's really precious. Yeah.
Sweet.
The story about Dr. Peter is very touching. They just celebrated 40 years of the clinic, and they had an evening last week at the village, a big dinner down by the pool at Crystal Hermitage, where they honored everybody from the clinic and Dr. Peter, and so many stories were told. I mean, it's hard to tell you. I was there when this clinic started. Peter actually wanted me and my husband at the time, a husband who died years ago now, but we were both physicians, to come and work at the clinic with him. And it wasn't what we were meant to do, but he just never Peter has been steadfast. He has gone through so much to make that clinic and passed up so many opportunities. You know, he's brilliant and he is a great soul. And he was offered residencies and fellowships at the finest places. And he just wanted to be near Ananda, and he wanted to serve the people in that area who are grossly underserved. And he's been doing that now for 40 years. There was one story that was told. If anybody needs to sign off, please just do. I won't talk for too long, I promise. But they started in an old, I thought it was a shack, but somebody said yesterday, Shama said it was a trailer. That's not how the story was told at the village, but whatever it was just an old thing that they found deserted, and he just put up a sign, literally. And somebody who lived locally was just furious. They were probably angry about Ananda, angry about a lot of things, obviously. One day they were on the land and they grabbed a patient. I mean, grab means got their attention and said, "This is ridiculous. This whole place should be torn down. That Dr. Peter, he should be put in jail for the rest of his life for doing this on this property." And he was going on, and the patient was just standing there. And then somebody said to the patient later, "What did you say to him?" He said, when he was all done, I just looked at him and I said, "Get the hell off my land." And he said, "If you ever speak about Peter that way on this ridge again, your life will be endangered." You know, just real, not, he didn't mean he would kill him. He meant the way it was said, it was like, so many people love this man. And Peter just spoke. It's going to go up online, by the way, what Davey said. He spoke for maybe 15 minutes, but it was so beautiful, so poignant. And she said there just wasn't a dry eye there. So it was really an acknowledgement of what Master has done through him, and that he has stuck to it every minute and gone through so much to get the rights, the license. Peter came to me maybe 4 years ago. You guys know who he is. He's amazing. I'm an internist, but I had a subspecialty in the field of chemical dependency. And he came to me and he said, "Shanti, I want to start being able to detox my own patients. There's very little good care for opiate addicts." And it was sort of a specialty of mine. And maybe it was longer ago. Maybe it was 6 years ago, 7. There were very few people doing it, just suffice it to say. With this newer drug that had come out, and you had to have a special license to do it. So I helped him get that license to be able to use this drug. And then I went up there twice and I sat with him and I taught him. And I said, "Do you want me to come the first couple of times?" He said, "No, I think I'm good." He said, "Will you be available if I call you?" I said, "Of course." He never called. Such courage, to just learn just that many years ago, a whole new thing. It is not easy taking somebody off of opiates, having them sit in your office, go through all that withdrawal while you start them on these other meds. Long story. But he didn't have to do that, but he wanted to provide that for so many people who need it. That was when Davy made the comment to me, "Shanti, we are living amongst angels." And we are. We are. We could mention many more angels who have just dedicated their lives. And I've been on this path since 1979, but that was not the beginning of it all. And I'm still often treated like a newcomer. I don't feel like a newcomer exactly. And my story of getting here with Master picking me up in Encinitas and literally dropping me off here, he knew what he was doing, of course. But, we have so many guru bhais to be grateful for. Satsang, the most important thing, Master said, next to God's grace on the spiritual path. And here we are. I feel really badly for those of you who might want to leave. So I'm sorry.
They can go. They are free to go if they need to.
Okay.
They know that.
We are with you.
Good.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it's okay to say this, that some people may not know that Dr. Peter did have COVID. And it took him weeks to come back.
He got pretty sick.
Yeah.
He said the day he got sick, the day he turned positive, he worked with 10 to 12 people who had COVID. He just never, I mean, honestly, most of us, I feel, would do the same thing in our own way. But, I mean, just to honor him, not only did he keep that practice open and running, but he guided the village. I mean, and many others were just waiting for his weekly talks. Yeah, he's a remarkable soul, truly. He's fine now, by the way, just fine. So, yeah. A lot of prayers for him. A lot of prayers were offered, you know. And when you're on the receiving side of those prayers, it's surprising. It's always shocking. It's like, wow, I feel them. You feel the moment that they kick in. It's pretty remarkable. So.
Okay. Anything else, anyone? This is our time. We have.
I just wanted to. I remember a quote from Swami in one of his writings, where, you know, going back to what Mike said about not making trouble for ourselves, and what you gave in the upward slope rather than the downward slope. And he was talking about how long he'd been doing these practices. And he said, I've been doing these practices every day, except for times when I was physically too ill to get out of bed, for 50 years, whatever it was at the time. And he said, this was not, you know, due to some sort of grim determination or some sort of you know, inner discipline or something. He said, it is simply the most meaningful thing I do on a daily basis.
It's beautiful.
So, you know, I feel like that's where we all want to get.
That's I'm so glad that you said that. I really am. Thank you. That's a wonderful place for us to end, is to remember. Just hold it, because it's there in us. It is who we are. Our sadhana is the most meaningful thing we do on a daily basis. We should never, ever go a day without doing some sadhana, ever. It's the most meaningful thing. So,
And these
thank you
thoughts-
all so much. What a great, great group. I'm sorry I'm not there with you in person. I really am, but maybe someday it'll work that way. Very beautiful. So,
Perhaps one day it will happen. We are open to that, and we are gathering a little bit more now, and how important that is with our sadhana, of course, but to come together in person. And next Sunday we do have that opportunity
with Asha.
with the entire Festival of Light and everything that we do in person. So please, devotees, do come. Shanti, if you can make it, let us know. we have housed many a great soul in Dallas.
Well, that would be wonderful. Not next week. You have Asha there, but yeah, just when it's time, just ask. And I honestly would love to come. You're beautiful, beautiful souls. And I remember doing service for you sometime, not that long ago. And I felt it then too. You know, this group that is so dedicated takes a lot for us to, well, to be joyfully willing to be here every Sunday.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right,
God,
great souls.
God bless.
God bless you.
Blessings.
And we always say from Texas, here it comes. Open your mics and let's say it. Namaste.
Namaste, y'all.
Beautiful. Bye, everyone.